What is up, everybody? Escape211 here, and we are getting into another best loadouts video, and today we're going to be focusing on Zephyr. This guy is your ambusher. He is a really solid mech and one that a lot of people use for sure, and he's great at control, just AoE control of different kind of stuff. Great for team play, all different kinds of stuff, and yeah, we're going to talk about some different loadouts for him from beginning to end. Now, this is one where he has a lot of options because he starts at 16 and goes up to 24. Not going to cover every single build, but I'm going to try to cover the breadth of, like, you know, the different styles of play with this guy. So with that all said, let's get into it and start with the early game. When you first get Zephyr, he has 16 energy, which is solid for just about any mech to start. Gives you a lot of great options right out of the box. And one of the best options in my mind, and a classic one, is the dual missile rack 8. I like to call this one the hit and run ambusher because, as we said, Zephyr is an ambusher, and this fits really well into that playstyle. Now, a lot of people are great with missile rack 8s, so this is no surprise, but at 16 energy and with this style of build, this is the perfect type of thing to use to get comfortable with Zephyr, to understand how his EMP works in terms of its range, how you can best position yourself, how long the EMP is. The missile racks give you a lot of flexibility to be able to play this well and still do great and get a lot of kills. So I recommend this one to a lot of people when you first get Zephyr because it's just a really great way to get used to the mech and use him to the best of his ability. Now, next up, we have another ambusher build, but it's one that's going to feature a different weapon set, of course. This is the Arc 10 and the Thermal Lance 6. Now, this I consider the support ambusher, just given the nature of how the overheat works from the Thermal Lance, so you can do some more support for your team. But the Arc 10 is obviously doing the heavy lifting with the ambushing here. And the Arc 10 is going to be a solid staple weapon you'll see on Zephyr a lot throughout the rest of these videos because it's a super good weapon to be up close and personal and ideal for Zephyr. So this is one where if you do not have another good sidearm and you want to be more flexible and do range, you can do this. You could also use like an RPG-6 if you want to do more straight damage, but this is one that allows you to have some range, do similar damage, as well as do some support for your team. So it has a good flexibility while still providing solid damage all around. Now, this is not your typical ambusher build like we've been talking about already with Zephyr, but this is what I like to call the battlefield controller build, and this is the dual carbine 8. Now, yes, this is a premium build, and some of you may not have access to the carbine 8 or plan to get it, but this is still a great build to put on Zephyr and one that you can have access to, especially if you spend money. Now, the reason we bring this one up and call it the battlefield controller is because it just has a lot of range that it can use to be able to hit its enemies. You can corner shoot really well, you can shoot down sights and far away. It has great accuracy, and then the optimal range of the carbine 8s fits in with the optimal range of Zephyr. And this is one where the DPS can shine quite well as you get close, especially if you get inside or back damage. Now, if you don't have access to the carbine 8s or don't plan to get them, you can also do something really similar with the pulse cannon 8s. The only difference is that the pulse cannon 8s take a little longer to kill, even though their optimal range is a little bit better, and it doesn't really fit exactly as well in with Zephyr as the carbine 8s do in terms of killing stuff fast during that EMP window. But it's still a really good weapon to use with Zephyr as another option to do this style of build, and it's one that actually fits in with your achievement path. So if you can't get the carbine 8s, definitely try this one with the pulse cannon 8s. Alright, with that said, let's move on from the 16 energy builds over to mid-game. Now, to start with mid-game, we're talking 18 energy builds. We're going to move on to 20 energy as part of mid-game and then move on to late. But when we go back over here into mid-game, we're going to focus again on what Zephyr is good at, and that is the ambushing. We're going to call this the burst ambusher, and that's the Arc 10 and the missile rack 8. Now, you're not really going to find too many other stuff that's going to burst enemies down or kill them as quickly as this build at 18 energy. This is a really solid one. This, again, is going to feel very similar to the dual missile rack 8 in terms of trying to do that, you know, quick damage, hit and run type fire, but you're going to have to stick around a little bit longer because the Arc 10 is more of a sustained damage than it is just burst damage like the missile rack is. But because you're putting down so much damage from both, and the damage is going to be a little bit heavier than the dual missile rack 8s, this is definitely a great one for 18 energy to go all in on that ambusher style that Zephyr plays really well with. Continuing with ambushing, we got this next one, which I call the flexible ambusher, and this is the carbine 10 with the missile rack 8. Again, this is still going to do great damage up close. You're sacrificing a little bit of damage from the Arc 10 to allow some good corner shooting or some range shooting with the carbines, but also still getting that solid optimal damage from it close up. So it still really plays into the ambushing style that the other build does, but gives you a little bit of flexibility to shoot down sights or further away with the carbine when the opportunity arises. Breaking away from your typical ambusher builds, we have something completely different. This is what I like to call the support controller build, and this is the Stasis 12 with the Thermal Lance 6. Now, this is definitely one that a lot of people don't use or know about as much, but if you're someone who likes to put stasis effects, play support, or just have ultimate battlefield control of your opponents, this is a great build to do. Not only are you going to be putting those effects on them, but with the EMP, you can control them further. Now, this isn't one that you're going to be doing a ton of killing or like hitting godlikes like the other ones, but you can do a lot for your team. And it's surprisingly effective, even with, you know, the idea of you fighting a target versus one-on-one, because you can EMP them, move around to the back as you're hitting them, especially with the stasis, and then even if you don't kill them, which you likely won't, they'll still be in that stasis effect and won't be able to turn around and fight you. So one-on-one, this actually is pretty comparable. It's a pretty solid build. And it's a nice one to use if you need to play a support role, or if your other awesome weapons or high-end burst weapons are tied up by other stuff. This can be a really effective build for that. So definitely one to try and consider, especially if you do more of team-based build layouts. Another build that breaks away from your typical ambusher would be this one. I call this Battlefield Control 2.0, and this is the Carbine 12 with the RPG 6. Now, obviously I called it 2.0 for the Battlefield controller because it's very similar to when we had the dual Carbine 8s. It's going to feel a lot like that because you're going to be shooting down sights a lot, corner shooting, all that kind of stuff, but still have some good options when enemies get close to be able to freeze them and be able to do solid optimal damage with the Carbine 12, and also a little bit of AoE damage if you freeze a couple guys with the RPG 6. Now, yes, you can also do this very similar build, or very similarly, with a Carbine 8 and a Carbine 10, but I wanted to mention this build because I think the Carbine 10 and Carbine 8 are clear choices, but if someone doesn't get those weapons or chooses to skip over those to go right to the Carbine 12, this build is very comparable. You lose a little bit of range on one side if you're doing corner shooting, but you gain a little bit of AoE damage if you hit a couple targets up close, so it's a little bit of a sacrifice there, but very similar on either end. Solid one for this type of build. Continuing on with mid-game, we get into the 20 energy builds as we get our Zephyr up to 6 stars, and right again, we're going to go back into ambusher mode, and this is going to be what I call the Burst Ambusher 2.0. Now, it's kind of counterintuitive with the name because this isn't Burst Ambusher just like the missile racks were. It's a little bit of sustained damage, but because this is going to be doing the most amount of damage you can at 20 energy for this kind of stuff in the ambusher role, this is why I consider this the Burst Ambusher. It's going to do well at taking targets down. It's also going to allow you to shoot down sights just a little bit, so it gives you a little bit of flexibility there, but mostly focuses on the ambushing style for sure. Next up, we have a build that lets you dive into pretty much ultimate flexibility. This is what I like to call the Battlefield Commander build, and this would be the Carbine 12 and the Missile Rack 8. Now, I see this build a lot just because it allows you to burst down, it allows you to corner shoot, it does great damage in both instances, it just covers a lot of range and a lot of situations very well. Overall, it's really good for battlefield control. Now, one I didn't mention here would be dual Carbine 10s. Now, again, at 20 energy, that would also be good, but I see that one less because a lot of people are less, you know, getting the dual Carbine 10 and then focusing more on the 12 again. So again, that would be a build you could use similar to this one. I just didn't show it here, but if you want to get a similar style, that would be similar. It trades a little bit of that burst damage to be able to corner shoot a little bit better, but still has very strong damage up close with the optimal range of both the Carbine 10s. At 20 energy, we can finally go all in on the ambusher role. This is where we can do what I like to call the ultimate ambusher. This is what Zephyr does best and what he focuses on with the dual Arc 10s. This is a really great build just for getting in close and killing anything. And I mean anything. Provided you have enough time within your EMP window, you get enough ammo, and you get in the right position, anything should fall before this build. It is ideal for the ambusher build. Now, that's really all it's good at. If you try to go a little bit further out or do other stuff, stuff, you have to, you know, stay within that 36 meters to be able to make this effective. And I do talk about other ambusher rolls even at 24 energy, but this may actually outpace it in damage. So if you want to go all in for that roll, you probably won't get any better than the dual arc 10s at 20 energy. Last at 20 energy, we have something that is less common for a build, but one that I find very fun and actually can be pretty effective on Zephyr as a kind of support build, and I call this one the Freezing Burst Support. I know, not the greatest name. I couldn't think of something for this one. If you have a better one, feel free to let me know in the comments, but this one is a Stasis Beam 12 with the Missile Rack 8. Now, I've done similar builds to this before with other mechs, and again, at range, it's very good, but again, because Zephyr has his freeze ability where he can EMP somebody, it's really easy, even against beefier targets, to be able to freeze them, get around to the side or back, and get them in stasis, and either burst them down with damage, or if you don't finish them off with the burst damage, to still be able to keep them in stasis, and then hopefully get another round of missile racks into those beefier targets. It's really effective at doing that kind of stuff, and like I said, it's a lot of fun to play. I really like it. But that's going to cover all the ones we have at 20 energy, so let's move on to the late game. All right, here we are at late game, and we are into the final 24 energy builds. And we're going to start right off again with Ambusher, which is what Zephyr is the best at. And this one I like to call the Ultimate Ambusher build 2.0, and this would be the Arc 10 with the Carbine 12. Yeah, I know we already have the dual Arc 10, and that's the Ultimate Ambusher. And this one is very similar in damage, probably sacrifices a very small amount of damage to give you the range that you can with a Carbine 12. You obviously are doing a little less damage up close, but it is a nice sacrifice to lose to be able to shoot down sights and get a little bit more flexibility overall with this build. So I like this one a lot. This is typically the one I use on my Zephyr as the ambusher role. I think it plays him really, or he plays it really well, and it's generally, in my case, ideal at 24 energy. Now, if you like burst damage, you're not going to get much better than this next build. This is what I like to call the Ultimate Burst build, and it's the Railgun 16 with the Missile Rack 8. This is a build that a lot of people have seen and have used on other mechs before, especially at the 24 energy mark, so this is really nothing new, but obviously it works very good on Zephyr. He's awesome for burst damage to get in and get out, so this plays very well into the hit and run style that he has, but it is really high burst damage as well as having great range with the Railgun and super high damage even at range. So this one is super good for Zephyr, and one that I think just about anybody who uses Zephyr will love to use this build too. Next, we have the build we all lovingly know as the Thanos build, and this is the Railgun 16 and the Long Arm 8. Now, this is a kind of counterintuitive build for Zephyr, just because he likes to be up close to his targets, but when the map or the situation warrants it, having a long-range build like this can work pretty well on Zephyr, and then if you want to, you can actually get up close and still deal pretty good damage. The Long Arm 8 is nice for taking down shields, and then hitting the overheat, and then you can get really high-end damage with the railgun if you're able to freeze and get to the side or back. So this one can be effective, but it's certainly less common. But in the right circumstances, it's one that I see every now and then for sure. Now, when I hit 24 energy, this was the build I most wanted to try, just because I think it has ultimate flexibility while still being really strong up close for the ambusher build. This is what I like to call the ultimate commander build, and this is the dual Carbine 12 build. Obviously, this is really damaging, really strong for a lot of stuff, can chew stuff up, and because it's one that allows you to do all the other stuff at range and corner shoot, it has the ultimate flexibility to do really well on just about any mech, but it's nice, especially for Zephyr, because the ideal range or the optimal range for the carbines fits right with the ambusher style. So this can be a really strong build in the hands of a good Zephyr player, and one that I like to play every now and then. And to top it off, we'll go with a fun build, but one we kind of already covered when we hit the 20 energy when we did the Freezing Burst Support. This is the Freezing Burst Support 2.0, and we're just swapping the Stasis Beam 12 for the 16. Nothing too crazy or major here, but this is definitely a bit more budget friendly once you hit 24 if you're looking for that sort of thing, and this is a lot of fun to play with. So I really liked playing with this build. Again, just like the other one, really great all around, but again, not much different than when we talked about it at 20. That's going to be it for this video, covering all the different builds of Zephyr. Now, like we said, this isn't everything, and we have some upcoming weapons like the higher level disc launchers and the Missile 12 that will certainly be in the mix. But if there are any other builds that you like that you thought we missed, feel free to comment below, and we will see you out there on the battlefield.